Hello guys, Fallen Messiah here and welcome to another Diablo 4 video. In this video, I will present my Ice Shard shotgun guide. I will take you through skills, items, Paragon, and show you how to build this blade. There have been a couple of new changes specifically to Ice Shard in this PTR. Some aspects have been improved. We have a new unique item, and we also have seasonal boss powers. This build takes advantage of all of that, so let's get straight to it. And before we do, these videos take a long time to make, so if you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing. I would love if you'd be able to hit 150 subs this month. That would be the dream. Your support is very much appreciated. Anyway, let's get straight into it. So first of all, why Ice Shard build? Because it's super fun. You're basically blasting monsters with ice shards that pierce to your opponents. It's super fast, super agile, and just visually really appealing to play. This is also a surprisingly tanky build. As far as Sorcerer builds are concerned, I actually only died when I tried the new bosses because they have mechanics that force you to evade them or otherwise you just die. Other than that, I don't really die. I've been to Torment 4, I've been to Pit 80+, and this build is surprisingly tanky. We have Ice Armor that gives us barrier and we have that up all the time. We also have Flame Shield that provides us with invulnerability on demand. And just overall our opponents are either slowed or frozen, so generally this is a very nice build to play. Now a couple of disclaimers out of the way. First of all, yes, this is a PTR build. It is generally heavily optimized, so very few players will actually reach this point in the season where they can sort of make the build the same as I did right now. So I understand that. And also, because this is a PTR, certain things are bound to be numerically changed, whether some things get buffed or some things get nerfed, so this is probably not going to be the final state of things in Season 8. The way things stand at the moment is basically what I'm going to show you in this video. Now before I show you the skills and everything else, let's talk about what this build can do. This build easily clears Torment 4. It can also farm the new bosses, so no worries about that. Now you have to understand that the difficulty has been significantly revamped from Season 7, so this is just something you have to keep in mind. I did Pit 75 with generally optimized gear, even though it can be optimized just a little bit more, but I will talk a little bit about that further into the video. And when I hit 80, I kind of hit a wall on Pit 80. But listen, Pit 80 in Season 8 is basically Pit 110, Pit 120 in the current live version. So I'm actually quite pleased with how this build performs. We'll call it a tier S build? Maybe not, maybe tier A+. But it's really fun and it absolutely easily clears anything in Torment 4 other than the new bosses that are a little bit challenging because they are specifically designed for you to kind of pay attention to what they're doing and their mechanics. But you can still kill them. But anyway, that's enough for me talking. Let's get into the actual skill portions in this video. So first we're gonna go with Frostbolt and Enhanced Frostbolt. This is basically just so you can progress further down the skill tree. Whatever you pick here is perfectly fine. This is our bread and butter, Ice Shards, Enhanced Ice Shards, and Greater Ice Shards. We want to max this out as much as you can, of course. We will put 3 points into Elemental Dominance for more damage. Then we move forward. We're gonna put 1 point into Flame Shield. It's gonna provide us with immune and also a fire portion of our Elemental Trifecta for Telrasha Ring. Here, we're gonna put 1 point in Teleport, Enhanced Teleport, and Shimmering Teleport. 3 points into Glass Cannon. I put 1 point into Energy Focus and 2 points into Dampen Layer just for extra damage reduction because we have a barrier on all the time. We have a couple of spare points to play with. You can sort of customize this how you want. We'll talk a little bit later about that as well. 1 point into Ice Armor, Enhanced Ice Armor and Shimmering. 1 point Ice Blades, Enhanced Ice Blades. And now here, if you want a little bit more attack speed, you can go for Invoked, but generally you're only going to have 1 or 2 Ice Blades out at any moment, so this is not actually such a big increase of attack speed. But you can go for Invoked, or you can go for Roaring for just a little bit more cooldown reduction. We put 1 point into Align the Elements just so we can go here for protection. We put 3 points in protection. This is a pretty good passive. It also provides us with additional barrier other than Ice Armor, so we basically have barrier on all the time because we're also spamming cooldowns all the time. 1 point Lightning Spear, 1 point Enhanced, and 1 point Invoked. Although you can technically take this off as well and put it somewhere else. This stun is not super important. We already freeze enemies all the time. Like I said, there are a couple of things you can do. You can take off from certain points. So make sure you have 1 point in Lightning Spear and Enhanced. This one, you know, if you want, you can put it here or you can put something else. We use Lightning Spear for another conjuration together with Ice Blades so that we can get more out of Primordial Binding. So we have 3 points here. So basically with each active summon, we gain these nice bonuses. We're gonna have 2 to 3 summons at all times, which is just a lot of mana regeneration, which is mostly why we're doing it. 3 points into Mana Shield. We're gonna put 3 points into Icy Veil for increased duration for our barriers. We put no points here. This is all from items. I'll talk about later in the item section, but this is a nice thing to have as well because it gives us more chance to freeze our opponents, and then when we freeze them, we just do a shit ton of damage. 3 points into Inner Flames. And then we skip here. We put everything we have into Permafrost. This is going to be our biggest damage multi in the skill tree. 3 points into Icy Touch, 3 points into Hoarfrost, 3 points into Elemental Synergies, 3 points into Evocation for cooldown reduction, 5 points into Unstable Currents, and 1 point into Prime Unstable Currents for 25% extra attack speed. And finally, we have 1 point into Enlightenment. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. I will also make a separate build that I will link down below that you can always reference just in case. Let's talk a little bit about Unstable Current. At the beginning, I went for Deep Freeze, but I had issues with Deep Freeze. The problem with this spell is, first of all, I just don't like it. Because what it does is, it essentially stops combat. This build is super fast-paced, designed for you to move around and blast opponents quickly with Ice Shards. But Deep Freeze, when you click it, it stops you in place and grants you certain things like immune and all that, which is nice, but it just interrupts the flow of the combat and I do not like it. Once you get out of the Deep Freeze, you get 25% extra multiplicative damage, which is all well and nice, but I just don't like how it flows. So you basically activate the Deep Freeze, you immediately deactivate it to get out of that ice cocoon, and then you have this damage multi, and then you have to do this all over again. I don't like it. So I decided to go for Unstable Currents, because now we have 25% extra attack speed. This is a great synergy with our Enlightenment key passive, which once we reach, we also get another 25 damage multi, attack speed, and mana regen. Okay, now that we covered the skill portion of the video, let's cover the items. We're using the new item Hail of Verglas. Hail of Verglas basically gives us multiplicative damage for our Ice Shards. It now spreads out with 2 additional shards, and we deal more multiplicative damage every time Ice Shards damage an enemy for 5 seconds up to 75%. So you can immediately see that I'm actually missing up to 10% extra multiplicative damage right on this item. One advantage you will have over me in the live version is because you'll be able to trade. I'm sort of embarrassed to even say how long I spent on this PTR just trying to assemble this build. I spent pretty much almost one entire day. So ultimately this is the best item that I could have found, so that's what I went with. But anyway, this item and one other aspect is the reason why we're going to be stacking as much attack speed as possible. We want as much Ice Shards out at any given time, and we want to attack as fast as possible. This is one of the reasons why. For this item, we're going for Intelligence. If you can, you should masterwork the Intelligence percentage. Life percentage is fine too. Shroud of False Death, I mean, what else can I say? This is the best item in the game. 1 to all passives is ridiculous. Try to get the one that has all stats GA. Either way, try to masterwork all stats if you're able to. Max life is fine. Just try not to get any tempers hit the damage on next attack after stealth, because that's a useless affix. For gauntlets, we're going with Intelligence, attack speed, and Ice Shards. Preferably, you would like to have GA on Ice Shards. I don't. Now, other than the weapon tempers, we don't really have any impactful tempers in this build, which is unfortunate. So we're going with the Frost Nova size and critical strike damage. Try to get the Masterworks on Ice Shards if you can. Intelligence is good as well. One thing you might notice is we're not actually using crit strike chance. Basically, we have 100% crit strike. Let me demonstrate that actually. 100% crit strike chance. Once we get to the boss power section of the video, I'm going to show you how we actually managed to do that without really having much on our gear at all. So we have that covered. So just so you know. For the legendary aspect, we're going with Storm Swell. We have 35x damage multi when we have Ice Armor on, and we have that all the time. For pants, we want Intelligence, Life, and Armor. This build is going to struggle a little bit with armor, so this is one of the ways that we can resolve that. If you can get armor GA, that's great. If not, that's also fine. For our tempers, we're going with total armor and we're going for Snap Freeze. Snap Freeze is the passive that gives us more chance on lucky hit strike to apply freeze, so we're gonna go with that. For the aspect, we're going with casting Ice Armor makes us unstoppable and gets us damage reduction. Again, we have that on all the time. That's also one of the reasons why we're so tanky. We always have unstoppable, we always have damage reduction, we always have a barrier. For boots, we want intelligence. You want movement speed to really take advantage of the speed and pace of this build. And for the third one, I went with mana per second. Now, you don't really need that. You can go for life if you're struggling, or you can go for something else. You can go for a defensive stat like all res. Personally, I like having that mana per second. I find that it smoothens the edges just a little bit, but if you can't get it, don't worry about it. You can go with life instead. For the aspect, we're going with the Orange Herald. Lucky hit, up to 13% chance to reduce the cooldown of our ultimate. Now, our Ice Shards have a fairly decent lucky hit chance, so you'll be actually having this decreased almost all the time. Our unstable currents are actually have a near 100% uptime in higher pits, which is really nice. For the weapon, you want either wand or dagger because those two have 1.2 attacks per second. We want to make sure we take advantage of as much attack speed as possible. For the stats, intelligence, max life. Third stat can be either crit damage or vulnerable damage. Either is fine. Monsters are vulnerable pretty much 100% of the time, so we always take advantage of that. Preferably though, if you have a choice, go with crit strike damage. I went with vulnerable because this was a nice little 3GA wand that I got, so I just wanted to wear it. For tempers, these are really the only two important tempers in this entire build. Chance for Ice Shards projectiles to cast twice, both here and on the focus. This is just straight up damage multiplier, so make sure you get as high value here as you can. If you can triple crit it in the masterwork, great. If not, that's fine. Try to get at least double crit. So we're going with Ice Shards projectiles to cast twice and critical strike damage. Same thing on the focus. Chance for Ice Shards to cast twice. And you can also go for crit damage. I went for vulnerable because, as you can see, I didn't have any tempers left. Now, for the focus, we're going with intelligence, and also preferably you will want to have cooldown reduction and lucky hit up to 50% chance to restore resource. This lucky hit is actually super nice, just to, again, smoothen out the edges, making sure that we always have mana, that we never have to worry about resource. So I suggest intelligence, cooldown reduction, and lucky hit to restore resource. You can also go for life if you're struggling to stay alive, although if you follow this, you really shouldn't struggle with that. On the focus, we're going with Shredding Blade. Just provides us with straight up 35x more multi because our enemies are vulnerable all the time. Now let's talk about the rings. So this build uses two mythics. One is Ring of Starless Skies. The only two affixes we care about here is attack speed and core skills. So try to hit them with the Masterworks. And the other one is Tal Rush's Iridescent Loop. The only affix here we care about is cooldown reduction. If you could triple crit that, that would be great. If not, that's fine too. Try to get the one that has as close to 35% as possible, because this is straight up 75% extra damage. So as you can see, I'm already missing, some important multipliers. I'm missing 10x here and 5x here. So that's 15 already. So in case you're not familiar, we need to make sure that we cast a Pyromancy, Shock, and Frost skill. Once we have all three stacks, then we only have to refresh them by casting Shock skill and Frost once every 8 seconds to refresh all three stacks. I'll show you that in the gameplay portion of this video. It's not complicated, but basically this is why we're using Flame Shield first and foremost. We have this on all the time. And finally, the amulet slot. The reason why I spent so many time in this PTR because I wanted to get a better amulet, but I must have opened like hundreds and hundreds of chests from that vendor, but I just couldn't get a better amulet and it pisses me off, but it is what it is. So basically you want intelligence percent, you want permafrost, and you want inner flame. Inner flames is this. So this is just straight up 18% multiplier that I'm missing because I didn't get that last temper. So ideally this is what you want to have. Critical strike chance is not important because, as I already mentioned, we max it out. For aspect, we're going with Piercing Cold. This has been buffed in Season 8. So now it says Ice Shards pierce 5 times and deal 75x multi damage, an additional 10% per enemy hit. So this is our biggest damage multi. That's why it's going on the Amulet, because Amulet has 50% bonus on the affix. Now let's talk about runes. We've taken Frost Nova out of our skill bar and instead we've replaced it with Seer and Thule. We cast 5 skills, which happens really fast, which you'll see later, and then we auto-cast Frost Nova, which not only freezes our targets but also makes them vulnerable. So this is just a really nice utility skill to have. For our second one, we're going with Igni Cry. With this combo, we will be pulling enemies towards us all the time. This is super important because the way that Ice Shards work, kind of like a shotgun, as you can see that it goes into a cone. We want our enemies to be as close to us as possible so they can get hit with as many Ice Shards as we can. So this actually is a quite significant damage magnifier by having this rune word pull the enemies towards us. You can also use your Mercenary right here. I think his ability Crater also pulls mobs in. That's another way you can do it. Now, when it comes to this second rune word, there are a couple other things you can do. For example, if you struggle to do damage, you can put Ohm Rune. It's going to give you 15% damage multi, and from my testing, it's usually has around 80% uptime, which is nice. If you feel like you're not getting enough resource, you can put Loom. And if you're not getting enough cooldown reduction, you can put Eon. So this second rune slot is a nice way for you to kind of fix the deficiencies of your build, especially early on while you still don't have access to all these Tempers, Masterworking, and Best in slot items. So it's a nice way to fix your build a little bit. So in case you're not super familiar, we have a new seasonal power mechanic in Season 8. They're called Boss Powers. You unlock them by killing every boss they're named after. You have one main power that has a certain trigger you have to activate for it to hit, and then you have 3 modifiers that do different things. Now, I'll have to say one thing. Some of these things are definitely getting nerfed because they are absolutely broken. I'm going to show you what interaction I went with and why. So first of all, for our main power, I went with Grigor's Lightning Square just because we need something that's going to cast with us. After you cast a core skill, lightning tiles outward. Like, the damage itself is actually pretty high, like 2.3 million. Ultimately, that's not why we pick it. We pick it because it procs all the time. One great replacement for that is also Lilith's Wind of Hate. Whenever we cast a skill, attack enemies with a wave of spikes. So the whole point of this is to have a main power that procs all the time. Why? Because of our first modifier, Harbinger of Hatred's Volley. We only care about the second part here that says activating your main boss power grants 30x increased vulnerable damage. This is another 30% multiplier that we're taking advantage of because our enemies are vulnerable all the time. And now we come to the most broken part of this section. We have Hatred Embrace Haste. This modifier gives us 70% critical strike chance just by itself. It's actually ridiculous. So we just put this here, we level it as much as we can, and great thing about this is that this is a magic boss power. This is available during the seasonal incursion events, so you can actually just snag it and make sure you get it as quickly as possible because it is really good. So you get 5% increased strike chance for every 1% of shadow resistance. It also, of course, counts all res bonuses too. We always have those, so this is just super good. This allows us basically to take off crit strike chance off of our gear and do something else with it. So make sure you get this one here. The third one is Cinnarod's Flames. Again, great part about this is because it's also a magic boss power. This is just straight up another 25% extra multiplier. Now, until you unlock that power, or if you're still struggling with crit strike chance, you can put Gar here with Igni. So, like I said, this slot is perfect to cover the deficiencies of your build. And that way you shouldn't struggle with critical strike chance. Alright guys, let's talk about Paragon. Now obviously I have 300 Paragon levels on the PTR. You will likely not have nearly as much in the live version. But listen, for this build to work, you need just to pick up the glyphs and all the legendary Paragon nodes, and for that it's gonna take you roughly around 200-210 levels in Paragon. Everything else is just fluff. When you get around 250 levels, then you're able to take advantage of some other things, especially defensive bonuses, which are actually quite plenty in this setup. For example, here we just get straight up damage reduction, no questions asked. Here we get damage reduction while healthy. Damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, you see what I mean. So once you get around 240, 250 Paragon, which is not super hard, you'll be able to take full advantage of pretty much everything here. As you can see, I didn't even put certain points here because I just don't even need them. Try to follow the correct order of glyphs and everything, but even if you don't, the main important thing is always to just get the glyphs out and get legendary nodes out. Everything else is not nearly as important. But for the most optimized way to do it, just following along the way I'm gonna show you. We're starting off with Destruction. Destruction basically gives us tremendous amount of critical strike damage. It's also a multiplier whenever we crit, and we crit all the time. It's first here because here is the biggest amount of normal nodes. So once you get out all 5 of your glyphs and you activate the additional bonus and you grab all the legendary nodes, then you will be returning here to grab every single dexterity that's left on this board. I will have a guide below the video where I'm going to put a 200 Paragon version, so don't get too intimidated by the fact that I have everything else picked out here. That's not super important. Just get the additional bonus unlocked, make sure to grab all of this maximum life here, and then you can simply move along. Our second board is Fundamental Release. Don't worry about this current bonus 40, it's not important. We are not using our ultimate skill for damage. This is just a straight up 50% damage multiplier every time we apply vulnerable or critically strike, which we'll do all the time. Again, I'm not going to be going over every single node here. Make sure you grab the legendary node, make sure you go to the glyph. Everything else can wait until you get more points to do it. Here we have Control. That's another multiplier for our crowd control enemies, and we always crowd control them basically in this build. Third one is Frigid Fate. By the way, if you're not sure how to rotate all of these boards, make sure to always prioritize legendary node that it's the closest to you. That way, while you're leveling, you can just grab it first because it's the biggest multiplier here, and then everything else is secondary. So we have Frigid Fate. Here we are rocking Eliminator. I've also selected every single intelligence here because it gets a bonus from the glyph. This is something you don't really have to do. And also all of these maximum life nodes along the way. Make sure to grab them if you can. Our next legendary node is Icefall. This is just another 25% X multi, just doubled on frozen enemies and bosses. Our fourth glyph is Winter, another multiplier. Again, more life nodes. And the last one is Searing Heat. Even though it's mostly a pyromancy legendary node, we still benefit from it. This is just another straight up 60% damage multiplier, which is very powerful. It's increased by critical strike damage. Thankfully, we have a lot of that. Our Dominator glyph also helps to proc this as well. For our last glyph on this board, we have Tactician. We deal 15% X multi damage. When we cast defensive skills, we will be casting defensive skills or ice armor in this case all the time. Okay, so before the gameplay portion of the video, I would just like to go over a couple of stats that you will need for Torment 4. Obviously, you need armor cap. As you can see, I'm also rest capped, and I don't have any consumables active at the moment. So for armor, pants are going to be your biggest source. Skulls, also make sure to have them in jewelry. I also have one all res here. And any extra points in Paragon should go towards any armor and res nodes that you can spare. Also for resistances, because we are intelligence based, we will be stacking it a lot to do damage. It's also naturally going to increase our all res. So while you're leveling, you might struggle, but later on all res shouldn't be too much of an issue. Still, if you struggle with armor or anything else, you can take advantage of elixirs and instances. So for example, Elixir of Fortitude, 20% extra life, Sage's Whisper, more intelligence, vitamin buzz, and soothing spices. These are my preferred consumables, but you also have one that just straight up gives you 300 armor, so make sure to take advantage of that if you're still struggling. Okay, now for the gameplay portion of this video, I just have to say a couple of things before that. We're using two enchantments. We're using Teleport Enchantment and Ice Shards Enchantment. Teleport Enchantment replaces our Evade with Teleport, and it lasts for 11 seconds. One important thing to note, on boots you actually want this implicit. Attacks reduce evade's cooldown by 1.5 seconds. This is going to allow you to teleport a lot more often in and out of combat. Other than mobility, one other reason why that is important is because we need to cast Pyromancy, Shock, and Frost skill in order to gain full advantage of Talrash's iridescent loop. So when you walk into combat, you first start by triggering Flame Shield. It doesn't matter if you're taking damage or not, this is just to get that first stack. Then you can cast either Teleport, Lightning Spear, or Unstable Current. You get that second stack, and then you just blast away with Ice Shards. And then as long as you teleport or press any of the two lightning skills within 8 seconds while you're blasting with the Ice Shards, you will get 3 stacks of this. So let me just show you how this works. So I never have less than 3 stacks. This is important because at 3 stacks we have 75% extra damage. Now when it comes to the actual combat, you basically just... When it comes to Tournament 4, you basically just blast monsters away with Ice Shard, and that's gonna be enough. For higher pit tiers, you have to be really pressing all the skills at your disposal. Make sure to always have Ice Armor on. And your Ice Blades are going to replenish the duration. So, what I'm just doing here, I'm just pressing right button, right? As you can see, my Ice Armor never goes off cooldown. Just make sure to always have Ice Blades because they're the ones really providing a lot of cooldown reduction. My right mouse button is casting Ice Shards. I always have Ice Armor on for damage, for mana regen, and I'm also just refreshing Ice Blades as well. And as you can see, I'm also never running out of mana. Now you do this, and then you also cast other skills when they're off cooldown. You use Evade, you use Lightning Spear for more mana regen, more vulnerable, and then Ultimate. When we cast Ultimate, we get Supercharged, and we have a lot of attack speed. And that's basically the rotation. When you're in trouble, you cast Flame Shield. Otherwise, just make sure you always have Ice Armor on, make sure your Ice Blades are refreshing the cooldown, and just every once in a while, cast Teleport to maintain Talrasha stacks. And then you're also just using Ultimate whenever it's on cooldown. Now, as you can see, with our aspect on our boots, we can almost always refresh the duration of our ultimate ability, which is actually really nice, so we almost always get that 25% extra attack speed. And that's basically it. And now I'm just going to show you how this looks like in its tier 75. As you can see, we're always unstoppable, we always have barrier. You really have to worry too much about any rotations. Just if things are off cooldown, activate them. That's it. That's the entire philosophy. Blast enemies with Ice Shards, and everything that's off cooldown, you activate. And that's basically it. And that's the pit. And there you go, guys. That was the new and improved Ice Shards build for Season 8 PTR. Now, of course, some things are bound to change in the live version. This is currently how it is. I will have a written guide down below in the video as well. So if anyone is interested, they can check it out. If I find any new interactions, something that work better, I will be updating that. As you can see, it does manage to clear Pit 75, which is actually something more like Pit 110, Pit 120 in the live version. So it's not a bad build. It absolutely blasts through Torment 4. It just probably isn't going to be the most performing build in the next season. But still, with that in mind, it's really fun. I enjoy playing it a lot, and I think you will too. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know. Once again, these videos take a long time to make. I spent an entire day in the PTR just to assemble this build, so if you can, please drop that, subscribe, like, and everything else to help the channel and the video grow. Anyway, that was it for me. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Fallen Messiah, and I'll see you in the next one.